You have been living as someone you are not. Not because you intended to deceive yourself, but because you never questioned the assumptions you inherited about who you were. You accepted them. You repeated them. And in repeating them, you became them. The lie you believe about yourself is not something that was told to you once and forgotten. It is something you tell yourself every day, in silence, without ceremony. And your entire world has arranged itself to prove you right. You look into the mirror of circumstance and see a reflection so convincing that you forget you are the one holding the glass. But the mirror is cracked, the image is distorted, and today we are going to shatter it completely. The world you see around you is not the cause of your assumptions. It is the result of them. Every condition, every repeated failure or rejection is not happening to you. It is happening from you. Neville told us again and again, consciousness is the only reality. That means the person you assume yourself to be in the secret conversations you have with yourself when no one else is listening is the person the world must reflect back to you. If you walk through life assuming you are unwanted, the world will withhold its invitations. If you assume you are incapable, opportunities will slip through your fingers like water. If you assume you are unlucky, coincidence itself will conspire against you, not because the universe is punishing you, but because assumption builds the track upon which experience must run. Most of us have no idea how deeply we have been assuming the wrong things. We think we want love, but we assume we are difficult to love. We think we want wealth, but we assume we are difficult to love. We think we want wealth, but we assume money is hard to come by, or that we are not the kind of person it flows to. We think we want freedom, but we assume we are trapped by circumstance, by history, by the decisions we made years ago. And all the while, we are shocked when our lives do not change. We say we are imagining. We say we are affirming. We say we are doing the work. But beneath it all, we are still wearing the old identity like a coat we forgot we put on. You cannot trick consciousness. You cannot pretend your way into a new self, but you can become aware of what you have been assuming, and you can choose, deliberately and with full authority, to assume something entirely new. Welcome. If this is your first time here, this channel is dedicated to the teachings of Neville Goddard, one of the most profound and practical mystics of the 20th century. Neville taught that imagination creates reality, that assumption hardens into fact, and that you are not a separate person hoping for change. You are the very consciousness in which all change occurs. This episode is about the assumptions you have been making about yourself without knowing it, and how to catch them, replace them, and live from an entirely different identity starting now. This is not theory. This is the mechanics of self-transformation. Stay with me, and by the end, you will know exactly how to stop being the person you never chose to be. Let us begin with the most important thing Neville ever taught. You are not a victim of your past, your circumstances, or your conditions. You are the operant power in your own life. Operant power. That means you are the one doing the creating, whether you know it or not. And what are you creating with? Not effort, not action, not willpower. You are creating with, not effort, not effort. An assumption is a belief you accept as true without proof. It is not something you think about. It is something you think from. And the tragedy of most lives is that people assume the worst about themselves and never stop to question it. When you were young, you learned to interpret the world through the eyes of others. A parent was impatient with you, and you assumed you were unremarkable. A lover left, and you assumed you were not enough. These were not truths. They were interpretations, but you accepted them. You took them in and made them your identity. And from that moment on, every experience you had was filtered through that assumption. You did not see the world as it was. You saw it as you were. And who were you? You were the one who believed the lie. Now let me tell you something that will undo years of confusion. The world does not tell you who you are. You tell the world who you are, and it listens. It has no choice. Neville said it plainly. The world is yourself pushed out. That means every person you encounter, every situation you face, every opportunity that comes or does not come, is a reflection of the state of consciousness you are occupying. If you walk into a room assuming you will be ignored, you will be. Not because people are cruel, but because your assumption casts a shadow over your presence that others unconsciously feel. If you assume you are valuable, needed, magnetic, that assumption radiates from you and others respond accordingly. They do not do it on purpose. They cannot help it. You are the broadcaster. They are the receivers. So the question is not what has happened to you. The question is, what have you been assuming about yourself? And I do not mean what you say in your affirmations. I mean what you feel when no one is watching. What do you assume when you look at your bank account, when you think about your body, when you imagine introducing yourself to someone you admire? What is the silent conclusion you come to about who you are in that moment? That is your assumption, and that is what is creating your experience. Let me give you an example. A woman once wrote to Neville and said that no matter what she did, she could not keep a job. She was qualified, she was polite, she worked hard, but again and again she was let go or passed over. She assumed the economy was bad, that employers were unreasonable, that she was simply unlucky. Neville asked her one question. What do you assume about yourself when you walk into an interview? She paused, and then she admitted, quietly, that she always felt she was bothering them, that she was taking up their time, that they would rather be speaking to someone else. There it was, not the economy, not bad luck, a silent, unconscious assumption that she was an inconvenience, and the world, being the perfect mirror that it is, reflected that assumption back to her again and again. Neville told her to change the assumption, to feel before the interview that she was wanted, that her presence was the answer they had been looking for, not to pretend, not to act confident, but to assume it so completely that her body, her tone, her very presence expressed it without effort. She did, and within days she had an offer, not because the world changed, because she did. And within days she had an offer, not because the work. Now you might think, yes, but that is about confidence. That is about belief. No, it is deeper than that. Confidence is something you try to build. Assumption is something you inhabit. Confidence is a feeling. Assumption is a state. And state is everything. Neville taught that you do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. Or more precisely, you become aware of what matches the state you are in. If you are assuming lack, you will see. You will become aware of what you are. Or more precisely, if you are assuming limitation, you will experience limitation. Not because those things are real in any ultimate sense, but because consciousness is selective. You see what you are tuned to. Change the assumption, and the channel changes instantly. This is not about thinking positively. Positive thinking is trying to paint over a wall that is already cracked. Assumption is tearing down the wall and building a new one. You are not trying to convince yourself of something you do not believe. You are daring to assume something so completely that belief becomes irrelevant. You are occupying a state, and when you occupy a state long enough, your outer world rearranges itself to match it. Not someday, now. This is the law. It has always been the law. The only question is whether you are using it consciously or unconsciously. Most people use it unconsciously. Most people use it unconsciously. They assume the same things they assumed yesterday, and the day before, and the day before. They assume they are the kind of person who struggles, who has bad luck, who never gets the break, who is always overlooked. And so they do struggle, and they are overlooked, and they do not get the break, and they take that as proof that their assumption was correct. They do not realize they are living in a loop of their own making. The assumption creates the experience. The experience reinforces the assumption, and round they go, blaming the world for what they themselves are authoring. But you are not most people. If you are hearing this, if these words are landing inside you with the force of recognition, it is because you are ready to break the loop. You are ready to see that you have been assuming the wrong things, not because you are broken, but because you did not know you had a choice. Now you do. So how do you catch a false assumption? It is not always obvious. You do not walk around saying, I assume I am not good enough. It is quieter than that. It shows up in the way you hesitate before speaking, the way you expect the other shoe to drop, the way you feel a little surprised when something goes well. It shows up in the inner conversation. Neville spoke often about inner talking. He said that your inner conversation, the things you say to yourself silently all day long, are more powerful than anything you say aloud, because they are the conversations you believe, and those conversations are always based on assumptions. Listen to what you say to yourself when you make a mistake. Do you say, well, that did not go as planned, but I will adjust? Or do you say, of course that happened. Nothing ever works out for me? Listen to what you say when someone compliments you. Do you receive it? Or do you deflect it, assuming they are just being nice? Listen to what you assume about your future. Do you imagine yourself finally living the life you desire? Or do you imagine the same struggles continuing, perhaps in a slightly different form? These are not idle thoughts. They are creative acts. Every inner conversation is an argument for or against a particular assumption about yourself. And the more you repeat that conversation, the more solid the assumption becomes, and the more your outer world conforms to it. This is why Neville said you must be vigilant. You must become aware of your inner talking and change it the moment it contradicts the state you wish to occupy, not because you are trying to be disciplined, because you finally understand that your inner conversations are not private. They are broadcasted into the fabric of reality itself, and reality responds. Now let me take you deeper. The assumptions you hold about yourself are not just thoughts. They are states of consciousness. And a state is a cluster of thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and expectations that all orbit around a single identity. When you are in the state of being unwanted, every thought you have, every feeling you feel, every expectation you hold is shaped by that identity. You do not have to try to feel unwanted. It happens automatically because you are identified with that state. But here is the beautiful, liberating truth. You are not bound to any state. You can exit one and enter another the moment you choose to assume a different identity. Neville told a story about a man who had been unemployed for over a year. He had sent out hundreds of applications. He had gone to interviews. He had done everything right on the outside, but nothing changed. Neville asked him, "Who are you assuming yourself to be right now?" The man said, "I am someone looking for work." Neville stopped him. "That is the problem," he said. "You are identified with lack. You are assuming yourself to be unemployed. As long as you do that, you will continue to look. You will continue to search. You will continue to be in the state of wanting a job, and that state will perpetuate itself endlessly." He told the man to assume he was employed. Not that he would be employed some day, but that he would employed none day, to feel the relief of it, to imagine the conversations he would have as an employed man, to stop thinking from the state of lack and start thinking from the state of fulfillment. The man resisted at first. He said, "But I am not employed. How can I assume I am?" Neville said, "You have been assuming you are unemployable, and look where that has gotten you. Try assuming the opposite. What do you have to lose?" The man did. He stopped identifying as someone who had work. He imagined his wife congratulating him. He imagined walking into an office that was his. He felt what it would feel like to be needed, to be contributing, to be secure. Within 2 weeks, a former colleague called him out of the blue with a position that had just opened, a position that had not been advertised, a position that was perfect for him. Coincidence? No. Consciousness? No. The moment he assumed the state of being employed, the bridge of incidents began to build itself. The world rushed to confirm his new assumption. This is not magic. This is law. You're always assuming something about yourself, and the world is always reflecting it back. The only question is whether you are assuming consciously or unconsciously. Most people assume unconsciously. And so they live at the mercy of whatever identity they absorb from their past. But you do not have to. You can decide right now who you are, not based on what has happened, not based on what others have said, based on who you choose to assume yourself to be. And here is the key. Assumption must be sustained long enough to harden into fact. Neville called this persistence in assumption. It is not enough to assume something once. You must live in that assumption. You must return to it again and again until it feels more natural than the old identity. And every time the old assumption tries to creep back in, you must catch it and replace it, not with force, with awareness, with choice. Let me be very clear. The old assumptions will return. You will have moments when you slip back into the identity of the person who struggles, who is overlooked, who is not enough. That is not failure. That is simply habit. The neural pathways are carved deep. The inner conversations are well rehearsed. But each time you catch yourself, each time you recognize the false assumption and deliberately choose a new one, You weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. You are not fighting against the past. You are building a new present, and the present is the only place where creation happens. So how do you permanently replace a negative self-assumption? First, you must become aware of it. You must name it. You must see it for what it is, not a truth, but a habit of thought. You might say, I have been assuming I am not capable, or I have been assuming I am unlucky, or I have been assuming I am unlucky, or I have been assuming I am too late, too old, too far behind. Say it plainly. Look at it is not a sin to have assumed wrongly. It is simply ignorance. And ignorance ends the moment you see the truth. Second, you must choose a new assumption, not a wish, not a hope, a definite assumption about who you now are. You do not say, I hope I am capable. You say, I am capable. You do not say, I am capable. You do not say, I am loved. You claim the identity as if it is already true, because in consciousness it is. The three-dimensional world may not yet reflect it, but that does not matter. You are not waiting for the world to give you permission to be who you choose to be. You are assuming it now, and the world will follow. Third, you must live from that assumption. This is where most people falter. They assume something new in a moment of inspiration, and then an hour later they are back to the old conversations, the old feelings, the old expectations. Neville said you must remain faithful to the assumption. You must think from it, not about it. You must let it color every inner conversation, every imaginal act, every response to the outer world. When something happens that seems to contradict your new assumption, you do not accept it as truth. You revise it. You reinterpret it. You see it through the lens of your new identity. Let me give you a practice. Tonight, before you sleep, bring to mind one assumption you have been making about yourself, that you have been assuming you are forgettable, or that you are not the kind of person success comes easily to, or that you are too much or not enough in some way. See that assumption clearly. Then, in your imagination, construct a scene that implies the opposite is true. If you have been assuming you are forgettable, imagine a friend saying to you, I was just thinking about you. If you have been assuming success is hard, imagine yourself expressing ease, saying to someone, things just seem to work out for me. Do not imagine the process of becoming that person. Imagine from the state of already being that person. Feel the reality of it. Hear the tone of voice. See the faces. Let the scene repeat until it feels natural, until it produces a quiet sense of satisfaction in you. That satisfaction is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That is the signal that you have successfully assumed a new state. And then, as you drift into sleep, let that be the last impression you take with you. Sleep in the assumption. Let it saturate your subconscious. And when you wake, do not immediately check to see if the outer world has changed. Instead, notice how you feel. Notice the quality of your inner conversations. Are they different? Are they freer? That is the real evidence. The outer world will follow in its own time, but the inner shift happens instantly. Now let us go deeper still, because this teaching is not only about manifesting conditions. It is about identity. It is about who you truly are beneath all assumptions. Neville taught that you are not a human being trying to become spiritual. You are imagination itself, wearing the mask of a human personality. And imagination, which Neville equated with God, is infinite. It is not bound by anything except the assumptions it takes on. When you assume you are limited, you experience limitation. When you assume you are minuted, you experience power. But in truth, you are neither. You are the one assuming. You are the consciousness in which all states exist. This means that no assumption you have ever made about yourself is final. No identity you have ever worn is permanent. You are not defined by your past, because your past is simply a series of assumptions that hardened into fact. And what has hardened can be softened. What has been assumed can be unassumed. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are simply identified with a state that is no longer serving you, and you have the power, right now, to disidentify and assume anew. Neville often quoted scripture not as religion, but as mystical psychology. He loved the verse from Paul, I die daily. What did Paul mean? He meant that every day he let go of the old man, the old identity, the old assumptions. He did not cling to who he had been. He allowed himself to be remade in consciousness, and so must you. You must be willing to die to the person you have been assuming yourself to be. That person is not you. It is a costume. And you have been wearing it so long that you forgot you put it on, but now you remember. And in remembering, you are free. You are free to assume that you are wanted, that you are capable, that you are destined for beauty and abundance and love. You are free to assume that the universe is not indifferent, but infinitely responsive to the state you occupy. You are free to assume that you are not a fragment of consciousness hoping to be noticed by God, but that you are God, imagining yourself into being again and again with every assumption you make. This is not arrogance. This is truth. Neville said it again and again. You are all imagination, and imagination is God. That does not mean your personality is God. It means the consciousness that you are. The I am that is reading these words right now is the same I am that creates worlds. And when you assume something about yourself, you are not hoping that God will hear you and grant your wish. You are declaring what is true in consciousness, and consciousness, being all that exists, must conform to your declaration. So assume boldly, assume specifically, assume persistently. Do not wait for the world to give you evidence that you are who you wish to be. The world is waiting for you to give it the script. You are the author. You have always been the author. You just forgot. Let me share with you a story from Neville's own life. He once told of a time when he was an unknown dancer in New York, struggling to pay rent, struggling to be seen. He wanted to go to Barbados to visit his family, but he had no money for the ticket. His teacher, Abdullah, told him to assume he was already in Barbados. Neville resisted. He said, "But I am in New York. I have no money. How can I assume I am in Barbados?" Abdullah looked at him and said, "You are in Barbados." Abdullah looked at him and said, "You are in Barbados." And he shut the door in his face. Neville went home, frustrated. But then he thought, what if I actually did this? What if I assumed, completely and without compromise, that I was in Barbados? So he did. He felt the warmth of the island. He imagined the faces of his family. He slept in the assumption that he was home. And within days, his family sent him a ticket. They said they had been thinking of him and wanted him to visit. It was not a miracle. It was consciousness externalizing. The moment he assumed the state of being in Barbados, the bridge of incidents built itself, and the outer world had no choice but to conform. This is what is available to you, not someday, not after you fix yourself or clear your blocks or become more spiritual. Now, you can assume right now that you are the person you have always wanted to be. You can assume that your desires are already fulfilled. You can assume that the thing you have been chasing is already yours, and in that assumption it becomes so, not because you forced it, because you claimed it in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. But here is the test. Can you sustain the assumption when nothing in the outer world confirms it? Can you persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled when your senses tell you otherwise? This is where most people fail, when your senses tell you otherwise. This is where most people fail. They assume something for a day, maybe a week, and then they look around and say, "See, it is not working." And they return to the old assumption, and the old life returns with it. Neville said, "Do not judge by appearances. Judge by the assumption. If you have assumed it in consciousness, it is already done. The outer world is simply catching up. This requires a kind of inner discipline, but not the discipline of effort, the discipline of knowing. You must know that consciousness is the only reality. You must know that the outer world is shadow, and you are the light that casts it. You must know that what you assume in secret, the world will proclaim in public, and you must live in that knowing, even when the evidence has not yet appeared. This is faith, not religious faith, but the faith that comes from understanding the law. Let me give you something practical to take with you. For the next 7 days, I want you to do this. Every morning when you wake, and every night before you sleep, ask yourself, who am I assuming myself to be right now? Do not answer with your name or your job or your circumstances. Answer with the identity you are occupying. Am I assuming I am someone who is struggling or someone who is thriving? Am I assuming I am someone who is struggling or someone who is thriving? Am I assuming I am someone who is struggling or seen? Am I assuming I am stuck or seen? Am I assuming I am stuck or free? And if the assumption is not who you'd be, Say to yourself, I have been assuming wrongly. I now assume that I am exactly who I wish to be, and then feel it. Do not analyze it. Do not question it. Just feel the truth of it in your body. Let it settle into you, and then go about your day or go to sleep holding that assumption as the truth. Do this every day for 7 days and watch what happens. Watch how your inner conversations change. Watch how opportunities appear that were not there before. Watch how people respond to you differently. You will not have changed anything on the outside. You will have changed everything on the inside. And the outside, being the mirror that it is, will have no choice but to reflect the new you. This is not a technique to get something. This is a technique to become someone. And when you become that someone in consciousness, everything that belongs to that identity flows to you naturally. You do not chase it. You do not force it. You simply allow it, because it is already yours. Now let me take you to the deepest truth of all. The assumptions you have been making about yourself are not just about success or love or money. They are about your very nature. Most people assume they are separate from the source of creation. They assume they are small, limited, at the mercy of forces beyond their control. And that assumption is the root of all suffering. Because when you assume you are separate, you feel alone, you feel powerless, you feel like a victim. And the world, ever faithful, reflects that assumption back to you. But Neville came to tell you the opposite. You are not separate. You are not small. You are not powerless. You are the consciousness in which the entire universe appears. You are the I am, and the I am is God. Not God as an old man in the sky, but God as the creative power that is imagining all of this into being. And that power is not outside you. It is you. This is what Neville meant when he said you are all imagination. He did not mean you are imaginary. He meant you are the one imagining. You are the dreamer, and your life is the dream. And in a dream, the dreamer can change anything simply by changing the dream. You do not need permission. You do not need to earn it. You simply decide what the dream will be, and it becomes so. So the ultimate assumption you must make is this: I am the operant power in my own experience. I am not a victim of circumstance. I am not bound by the past. I am not limited by what others believe. I am the consciousness that creates, and whatever I assume to be true must become true, because there is no other power but consciousness. This is not something you believe. This is something you test. Neville said again and again, try it. Do not take my word for it. Test it in your own experience. Assume something about yourself that contradicts your current circumstances, and watch as the circumstances change to match the assumption. Do it once, and you will see. Do it 100 times, and you will know. And once you know, you will never again accept a false assumption as truth. Let me close with this. You clicked on this episode because something in you recognized the words. The lie you believe about yourself. You knew, on some level, that you have been assuming wrongly, that you have been living as someone you are not. And now you know what to do. You do not fix the past. You do not clear the blocks. You do not heal the wounds. You simply assume a new identity, and the past dissolves because it was only ever held in place by the assumption you were making. The cracked mirror in the thumbnail was not an accident. It was a symbol. The reflection you have been seeing, the person you thought you were, was distorted. It was not the truth. It was a product of false assumptions. And now the mirror is shattered. You are free to see yourself as you truly are, infinite, powerful, divine, not because you earned it, because you assumed it. So tonight, when you lie down to sleep, do not review the day that was. Do not worry about the day that is coming. Assume the identity of the person you wish to be, and fall asleep in that assumption. Let it be the last thing you feel. And when you wake, do not ask if it were. Simply continue to assume it, and watch as your entire world reshapes itself to match the new you. You are not who you thought you were. You are who you assume yourself to be, and you can assume anything. So assume greatly. Assume boldly. Assume the life you were born to live, and know that in assuming it, you have already claimed it. The outer world is simply a matter of time, and time is nothing but the interval between assumption and manifestation. You have been assuming the wrong things, but no longer. Now you know. And in knowing, you are free. Go and live from that freedom. Go and assume your greatness, and let the world, faithful mirror that it is, reflect back to you the truth of who you have always been.